Okay, so what do you think? And that's where I want to open it up to discussion. Is there a pet theory of yours that you're thinking, you know what, I don't know if it still flies? Yes, sir.
Steve, this is not a pet theory. I just want to talk about a little research that I've found, which I think is very interesting and opens the door on a lot of the questions that you're talking about. Of course, one of the things that I've done research on is immediacy, and immediacy in the classroom situation. And immediacy is anything that creates a feeling of psychological or physical closeness. And the research is really good. It shows that higher immediacy behaviors by the faculty member increases affective and cognitive learning by the students. Now, then look at that online. And I found one study, and that is the extent of the field now. One study here and one study there.
Yeah.
One study where they were doing online education using avatars. And the faculty member was an avatar. And they found that when the avatar exhibited immediacy behaviors, they got the same effect with students.
Really?
That they did in face-to-face, which is absolutely fascinating. Now, the other idea that I think is interesting, based on something you said, we know that nonverbal communication is important in personal relationships because of the affective dimension.
Right.
It primarily communicates emotion, okay? What if you change your relationship with others through the use of a different voice with your avatar? Does that fundamentally change the nature of the relationship?
I can give you an example. Looking back through some of Lauren Collister's work, in her interactions, because it starts as a speech bubble environment, your avatar just puts up, you text in something, and you stay in character. But she showed some examples of if she's at her desk at her home playing this game, and she says, hang on, my cat just knocked over my cup of coffee. Everybody in the game world knows that her avatar does not have a cat, and her avatar did not just knock over a fantasy cat or a fantasy cup of coffee. And they can jump in and out of, and she does a real neat diagram about this, the real world space and the game world space. Another one was where these two gentlemen who both had female avatars, and they both used voice modulators, so they sounded like they went from their husky voice, male voice, to a feminine voice, and they tried their best to sound like women. One guy never revealed that. One guy was very open about saying, I'm a man and I'm playing a woman. He was teased and accepted. The man who never revealed that, but it came out that he was actually a man portraying a woman, was ostracized.
Well, does this get into one of the topics from one of the papers yesterday, deception? I mean, where are the relationships? I think this is just a fascinating area that we should be researching to figure out what difference does it make.
Anybody else?
I do believe that with online relationships, a lot of deception is it's just possible.
Oh,
You can hide your
it's
identity.
definitely possible, but where's the research to demonstrate that
Yeah.
it exists and what effect it has?
I agree.
Do you think that young people, I say young people because they're the generation that's grown up with this as normal, and I don't know how to explain it to my students. You are in a phenomenal revolution. I've watched it happen. You've lived it. You don't know it's a revolution.
A technology-driven social revolution.
Do they realize those boundaries? Do they just assume that, okay, some people are deceptive, they're not who they are, and that's okay, it's kind of like a game. But for the most part, I'm just transparent. And I am who I am online or as I would be face-to-face.
I would wonder, are people deceiving themselves? I do a lot of gaming. There are devices that allow a Connect module for certain systems. It echoes all of the material through a mic that is happening in the household. People don't seem to realize. All right, you go to your bio page, it might say your name, the city you are from, the state you are from. And now, the additional information of, I hear 3 kids in the background, people are calling each other by name, and they don't seem to realize that they are giving very intimate knowledge to an open world environment without thinking about it. It's because I'm in a safe environment. I'm in my own home.
Are we just really trusting of the cyber world?
We're not realizing we're deceiving ourselves that because we are in our own home, what could possibly happen?
Yeah.
I took a 10 and a 14-year-old girl hiking last week, and I've recently seen some stuff on the internet of things that people had been doing outside, setting things on fire and, poking holes in things, exploring the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were doing those things, and I was like, this was a lot cooler on the internet. And I was totally floored when the 10 and the 14-year-old then explained to me the reasons why it would have been cooler on the internet, including video editing and somebody have dousing the thing that was burning with chemicals. And they were able to, I was totally floored with their ability to tell me how the internet was deceiving them.
So they are aware.
These two were, yes.
And yet we embrace that. We still embrace that environment. Okay.
So I'm really interested in how people nowadays are, of course, like the one guy who was ostracized because he came out, right? Nowadays we still actually do this to almost like penalize him for deceiving us. However, I think future generation probably will think that's part of their life, their own identity. You can deceive as you like, because once you are in cyber, it's just open space. You can jump back and forth, either back into your own identity or just your cyber identity. Now we still have it's almost like the framework you talk about. It's almost like mainstream kind of framework. We are still talking about, if you didn't tell me about your true identity and I feel I'm deceived. However, this cyberspace itself is actually an opportunity. Itself is a sphere where people can live a different identity. Why ostracize that person in the future? I think people will be more probably acceptable as a part of just that person, right? It
Jenny,
shows
I'm sorry. Do you think that maybe it becomes a cultural norm, particularly for this younger generation? But is there still something fundamental in us as human beings that even though we know that happens and it's normal, it's accepted, fundamentally something in me says, but it's still wrong. And I feel still like I've been cheated or I've been lied to.
But you see, isn't that an interesting question from a generational perspective? So aren't we talking generational research here?
Well, the MIT researcher that wrote Alone Together, she has looked at the whole idea of the use of all of these different ways of identifying yourself, and she says what's happened is that we've lost our ability to communicate interpersonally, that we're alone together, that even though we're in the same room, we're texting the person who's across the way. Instead of just saying, hi, Carlos, you're texting him. And she sees great concern for that, and her research has looked at robots and how people communicate with them. And she says now people are actually forming deep relationships with robots. These robots that are made to look like pets. They invest love and treat them just as if they are living creatures. And so she says we have created an environment where we don't know how to communicate with one another. And I'm not sure what theory can explain that.
Oh my God.
I read a CNN article about this phenomenon that we've become so text-based that we don't know how to have relationships. We don't know how to have a conversation. One college-age person said, someday I hope to learn how to have a conversation. They were almost 25.
There's so much overlap, and I see with the technological changes more and more overlap in mass communication research, and of course CMC and human communication research. One of the things I've done a little bit of, mostly in my mind, not too much actual research on it, is apply some of the mass communication analysis approaches like parasocial interaction. which is the mock relationships people have with fictional characters or real characters in books, in films. It's mostly been done with TV, but this could maybe kind of apply to relationships with robots, or I don't know about avatars, because you do have a real human behind that, who's interacting via the computer-mediated communication with the real person here. But it might apply to some of the faux relationships that people are starting to have, particularly children, with animated toys and robots and things of that sort.
You reminded me of something else I came across when I taught that course a couple years ago. A study that looked at who we project ourselves to be, and I think it was from psychology, when we create an avatar, an online version of ourselves. And they were looking at extrovert versus introverted type of people who uses that more, and some of the studies are mixed about that. Because everybody uses it. But one of the things that came out that I thought was fascinating, from a psychological perspective, which is the real you? This is your real person who's sitting at the computer console, or is this your real you that's out there and what you really see yourself as?
Well, and don't get into wonderful areas of self-perception research.
Yeah. What is self-perception?
Another study that I found really interesting when I was working on virtual groups was, well, and of course, one of the things that we know about virtual groups is that most of the nonverbal is going to be missing. It's not going to be there through most of the technology that people are using to interact. And, you know, you would initially think, well, that's going to diminish the quality of the relationships. Well, that's a nice hypothesis. But this study found that virtual groups were actually more efficient and more productive because of the absence of the emotional content.
Okay.
At least that was their hypothesis.
All right. Put that into relational development and moving in stages from acquaintance to an intimate relationship. What builds a better relationship? Maybe a mail-order bride was a good way to go. Maybe setting up an arranged marriage and you start with correspondence through letters.
The affective dimension.
Yeah. Now, do we though, and this gets into some media richness theory as well, do we find ways to push those nonverbal cues into our technology? And of course, now our technology is catching up. That's one of the aspects of this too. I'm trying to figure out, is this the way we've always wanted to be able to communicate? With just anybody, anytime, at our leisure, whenever we want to access the information or if we want to synchronously communicate, to be able to communicate everything that's in our mind. Think about this. Somebody got a pen? I think I have a pen. That's a loss. Anybody got a pen or a pencil? Okay. This is what we've done for 5,000 years, at least. A two-dimensional representation of our thoughts. Think about that. Even with this, still two-dimensional.
Mhm.
We create three-dimensional imagery, but there's not a Minority Report kind of visual interface that's three-dimensional that we interact with. And we can't just project our thoughts. There's no mind control yet, right? We're getting voice control though. So are the tools just catching up to the way we'd like to be able to communicate as humans? Yes?
The Turkle, Sherry Turkle? Yeah. So one of the things she talks about in that book is how younger people feel anxious and upset when they cannot read a text, when they are separated from the communication that is happening while they're in class.
Yeah.
That they say that they can, I believe it's, did you read the book? Yeah. Am I right? This is her, yeah. That they,
it's not just a representation of themselves, it's become themselves.
right, and they feel like they know when they're getting a text, even when their phone is in their locker and not with them, but they feel literally anxious,
That
not
sounds more
being
like an
able,
addiction.
yes, not being able to participate in this. And I have a colleague who will occasionally take technology breaks from her job, like a half a day where she's just going to work without interruption. And she is then being flooded with, this has got to be done, and this has got to be done, and this has got to be done. And at the end of the day, she goes and checks her email. Everything's been resolved, and then she gets something from her chair that says, why were you not volunteering to help cover this? Why were you not? So there is an expectation from others that we are constantly connected, and an expectation from the students from themselves or young people to be constantly connected, or they feel like almost physically ill.
Well, as you said, just a second, Joe. As you mentioned, the workplace environment is one of the things I've been cautioning students, the ability to work from anywhere. What expectation does that create for your boss? Or your friends?
That's exactly where I was going to go. There are, how many times get an email that somebody sent at 7:30 on Tuesday night, and 8:45 on Wednesday, they're saying, did you have a chance to look at that? And it was like 7 hours work.
Yeah.
But the erosion of boundaries, it's not only in the classroom and all this, but same thing's happening in the workplace. The expectation that you're always available, always connected.
So is that the norm? Is that the new norm?
It unfortunately seems to be.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Absolutely not.
Is it like moving from Victorian standards to today's world?
Well, one of the things that frustrated me recently with the new Google Hangouts replacing Google Talk, you can't hide anymore. I have my Gmail on all the time. I like to be connected all the time, but I don't like people to see, hey, he's there, I can bug him.
Oh,
You know?
So you know you're linked.
Yeah, and by the way, if you try to go back, you can't. It still leaves you visible permanently, so I just finally gave up. And I'm trying to learn the new culture of Google Hangouts, which is apparently you can either pause, you can go on standby for up to 48 hours, or I think maybe a new social expectation with that will be, I might not answer if you message me right now. And that, to me, seems kind of rude, but that might be the way it kind of evolves.
Well, think about it, face-to-face conversation, and I try to tell this. If